In a small village surrounded by green forests and colorful flowers, there lived a sweet young girl with rosy cheeks and bright eyes. Everyone in the village knew her for her kindness and beautiful smile, but what made her truly special was the bright red cape she always wore. This cape was a precious gift from her grandmother, who had spent many days carefully sewing it with love. The cape was as red as the roses in their garden, with a comfortable hood that kept her warm during cold days. Since she wore this red cape every single day, the villagers naturally started calling her Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red lived in a cozy wooden house with her mother. Their home always smelled of fresh bread and flowers from their garden. Every morning, she would wake up early to help her mother with the daily tasks. Together, they would prepare breakfast, bake bread, and take care of their small vegetable garden. Their mornings were filled with joy as they worked side by side.
Você já parou para pensar que enquanto escuta essa história poderia estar entendendo cada palavra em inglês de forma natural, sem precisar ir ficar lendo essa legenda que está na tela? Isso não acontece com você pelo simples motivo de que você não recebe feedback diário e nem pratica seu inglês. Por esse motivo, nós criamos o CAS, um super professor de inglês de inteligência artificial que você usa no seu próprio WhatsApp. Mas ele não é uma simples IA, é um super professor particular que você tem acesso 24 horas por dia, onde ele te ensina, corrige seus erros e ainda simula conversas reais por áudio e texto, e ainda se adapta ao seu ritmo. Tudo isso sem sair do app que você já usa o tempo todo. E tem mais, essa IA foi treinada com cérebros de professores renomados, então você vai aprender com a melhor didática possível. Então se você já tentou de tudo e ainda não viu resultados, o CAS vai ser a virada de chave que você precisa. O link está na descrição.
Little Red loved learning new recipes from her mother, who was known throughout the village as an excellent cook. On the other side of the forest lived her grandmother in a pretty little house with a red roof and white windows. She was a wonderful woman who spent her days tending to her beautiful garden and baking the most delicious cookies in the village. Her house constantly filled with the sweet scents of vanilla and cinnamon. Little Red and her mother visited grandmother as often as they could, and these visits were always the highlight of Little Red's week. During their visits, they would gather in grandmother's cozy living room. The old woman would share stories about the past while they enjoyed warm, freshly baked cookies and milk. Grandmother's stories were full of wisdom, teaching Little Red about family traditions and important life lessons. These precious moments brought the three generations closer together, creating memories filled with love and laughter. They were a close-knit family, deeply connected by their love, respect, and joy of being together. The villagers often spoke about how lucky Little Red was to have such a loving family, and she knew this in her heart to be true. One morning, Little Red's mother received news that grandmother was feeling sick. She had caught a bad cold and needed to stay in bed. The mother knew that her mother needed help, so she prepared a special basket full of things to make grandmother feel better. She filled it with fresh bread, still warm from the oven, sweet honey for her tea, and homemade soup that would help with the cold. She also added some fresh fruits and cookies, knowing these would bring a smile to grandmother's face. The mother carefully explained to Little Red that she needed to take this basket to grandmother's house. She wrapped everything carefully and covered the basket with a clean white cloth to keep the food warm. The mother was worried about sending Little Red alone through the forest, but she knew her daughter was responsible. Still, she wanted to make sure Little Red would be safe on her journey. Before Little Red left, her mother gave her clear instructions. She told her to walk straight to grandmother's house without any delays. The path through the forest was clear and well marked, and Little Red knew it well from their many visits together. Her mother reminded her to be careful and not talk to any strangers she might meet along the way. She should focus on her important mission, delivering the basket of food and medicine to her sick grandmother. Little Red listened carefully to all of her mother's instructions. She put on her red cape, took the heavy basket in her hands, and prepared for her journey. The basket was filled with love and care, and she felt proud that her mother trusted her with this important task. She understood that her grandmother needed these supplies, and she was determined to deliver them safely. The morning sun was bright, and the air was fresh when Little Red started her walk to grandmother's house. She held the basket carefully with both hands, making sure nothing would spill or break. In her mind, She kept repeating her mother's instructions about staying on the path and going straight to grandmother's house. She was excited about her first solo journey through the forest, but she also remembered the importance of being careful and responsible. As Little Red walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and closer together. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating beautiful patterns on the forest path. The morning was peaceful, filled with the sweet songs of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Little Red enjoyed the beautiful day, but she remembered to stay focused on her important task. Suddenly, a large gray wolf appeared on the path in front of her. This wolf was different from the others in the forest. He walked on his back legs and wore a simple brown jacket. His sharp teeth showed when he smiled, and his yellow eyes watched Little Red with great interest. The wolf had been following her quietly through the forest, watching her from behind the trees. The wolf knew that Little Red was carrying food in her basket. He could smell the fresh bread and soup, and this made him very hungry. But more than the food, he was interested in knowing where such a young girl was going all alone. The wolf was clever and had a plan. Instead of scaring Little Red, he decided to act friendly and polite. When the wolf asked Little Red about her journey, she forgot her mother's warning about talking to strangers. The wolf seemed so nice and interested in her story that she told him everything. She explained about her sick grandmother, showed him the basket of food and medicine, and even told him exactly where her grandmother's house was. The wolf listened carefully to every detail, nodding his head and showing great concern for the sick grandmother. The wolf then pointed to some beautiful flowers growing near the path. He suggested that Little Red's grandmother would feel much better if she had some pretty flowers by her bed. The flowers were not far from the path, and they were indeed very beautiful. Little Red looked at the flowers and thought about how happy they would make her grandmother. The wolf's suggestion seemed so kind that she decided to pick a few flowers, even though this meant disobeying her mother's instruction to go straight to grandmother's house. While Little Red wandered off the path to pick flowers, the wolf saw his chance. Knowing exactly where grandmother's house was, he quietly slipped away. He took a shorter path through the forest, moving quickly on his strong legs. The wolf had a wicked plan in his mind, and he hurried toward grandmother's house, leaving Little Red behind as she gathered more and more colorful flowers for her grandmother. The wolf reached grandmother's house quickly. The small house looked peaceful with its red roof and white windows, and smoke coming from the chimney. The wolf knew he had to trick grandmother, so he softened his voice to sound like Little Red. He knocked gently on the door, trying to hide his excitement. Inside the house, grandmother was in bed with her cold. She was too weak to get up, but she heard the soft knock on her door. When the wolf called out in his fake voice, grandmother thought it was her beloved granddaughter bringing medicine and food. She told him to pull the string to open the door, not knowing the terrible mistake she was making. The wolf entered the house quietly. The room was warm from the fireplace, and he could smell medicine and honey. Poor grandmother only had time to look surprised before the wolf showed his true nature. In one quick movement, he grabbed grandmother and pushed her into the large wooden closet in the corner of the room. He locked the door and put the key in his jacket pocket. Now that grandmother was safely locked away, the wolf started the next part of his plan. He put on grandmother's sleeping cap and her favorite shawl. He climbed into her bed and pulled the blankets up to his chin. He arranged the pillows to hide his pointed ears and tried to make himself look smaller. The wolf practiced making his voice sound soft and weak, like someone with a cold. The wolf felt very pleased with his clever plan. From grandmother's bed, he could see the path through the forest. He watched and waited for Little Red to arrive, knowing she would take her time picking flowers. Everything was ready for his trick. The wolf smiled to himself, showing all his sharp teeth, and settled deeper into grandmother's bed to wait for Little Red. Little Red finally arrived at her grandmother's house, her basket still full of food and medicine, and now also carrying a beautiful bunch of colorful flowers. She noticed something different about the house. It was too quiet, with no birds singing in grandmother's garden. Still, she walked to the door, excited to help her sick grandmother feel better. When Little Red entered the house, everything looked strange. The curtains were closed, making the room dark. The fire in the fireplace was low, and the room felt cold. In grandmother's bed, she saw a figure under the blankets. It looked like her grandmother, wearing her usual sleeping cap, but something wasn't quite right. Little Red moved closer to the bed. She noticed that grandmother looked very different today. Her face seemed longer, and her eyes were unusually bright and yellow. Her ears stuck out from under the sleeping cap, much larger than normal. Even her hands, resting on top of the blanket, looked wrong with their long fingers and sharp nails. As Little Red looked at her grandmother, she started to feel scared. She noticed more and more things that weren't normal. Grandmother's voice sounded deeper and rougher, even though she tried to speak softly. Her mouth looked different too, with strange sharp teeth showing when she spoke. Little Red had never seen her grandmother look this way before. The basket of food and medicine still in her hands, Little Red stood next to the bed. She could hear strange noises coming from the big wooden closet in the corner, but she was too focused on the strange appearance of her grandmother to pay attention. With each passing moment, her fear grew stronger as she realized that this creature in her grandmother's bed couldn't possibly be her loving grandmother. Just as Little Red realized she was in danger, a woodcutter who worked near grandmother's house heard strange noises. He was a strong man who knew all the people in the forest, including Little Red and her grandmother. The woodcutter had seen the wolf running through the forest earlier, and he felt something was wrong. The woodcutter rushed into the house just in time. He saw the wolf, still wearing grandmother's clothes, trying to scare Little Red. Without hesitation, the woodcutter used his strong arms to grab the wolf. The wolf was so surprised by the woodcutter's entrance that he couldn't react. Little Red quickly moved away from the bed and ran to the door. The woodcutter heard sounds coming from the wooden closet and found the key in the wolf's jacket pocket. When he opened the closet door, grandmother came out, scared but unharmed. She immediately hugged Little Red, relieved that her granddaughter was safe. The woodcutter tied the wolf up with a strong rope and decided to take him far away from the village, to a place where he could never harm anyone again. Grandmother's house soon returned to its warm and happy state. The woodcutter started a new fire in the fireplace, and Little Red served the soup and bread she had brought in her basket. The three of them sat together while grandmother recovered from her scary experience. The fresh flowers Little Red had picked now brightened the room from a vase on the table. That evening, when Little Red and the woodcutter walked back through the forest, she thought about what had happened. She understood why her mother had warned her about talking to strangers and staying on the path. From that day on, Little Red always followed her mother's instructions carefully. She still visited her grandmother often, bringing food and flowers, but she never stopped to talk to strangers in the forest again. The forest path remained safe for Little Red, and she lived happily with her loving family, a bit wiser from her adventure.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, não se esqueça de se inscrever no canal. E também dá uma conferida lá no cast que tá aqui na descrição desse vídeo para você aprender inglês mais rápido. Até a próxima!